Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Adebanjo Faith Adeola, and in this video I'll be giving us 7 guidelines that I have learnt and I'm putting to practice on how to curb and handle toddlers generally when it comes to disciplining them. Okay. So the first point I would like to make is that you don't take their misbehavior personally. I mean, they are children, they are toddlers. They can't be bad such that they want to just hurt your feelings so deliberately. No, they love us and they know and may not know that you love them too. And they are just being toddlers. That's just the stage they are. Just like you have teenagers and teenagers behaving the way they behave. These are also toddlers, and this is the time when they just do all sorts. It could be annoying to get on our nerves, but please, we are going to learn not to take all of those behaviors personally. Secondly, create a predictable environment for them and be realistic with it. Okay, for instance, bedtime. Rather than just allowing them to go to bed just anytime they feel like, or falling asleep in the night, maybe 10, 11, some earlier, some later, and all of those random things. Form a specific routine that they would get used to over time. It mustn't be something complex, something very basic, very simple. An instance, I'll just use what I'm working on right now. I'm trying to the pattern I'm trying to form for my daughter, who is 1.5 years old, is that when it's time to go to bed, what we do most of the time after food, first thing we do is to brush her teeth. Sometimes we might not be so consistent with that because sometimes I'm tired and all of that, but we brush. Then next is that we take a shower, march to her room, she picks the dress she wants to wear to bed, and we put it on, and then we read our Bible story in the night, sing a few songs, we put off the light, and it's time to sleep. So that's the pattern we're trying to build for bedtime right now. This can go for every other part of the day. Just form something simple and basic that the child will know what to expect next. Okay, so it's not like things are just coming randomly, and children are actually built with a sense of order, and when we create an environment that is quite predictable to them, it reduces their chances of throwing tantrums and being worked up altogether. And also be realistic with your expectations. They are children. You don't expect a little toddler to sit down one place. Like, it is very unrealistic to ask a toddler to just sit still. It is very unrealistic. So we should try to be very realistic with our expectations. Another thing to note is that we should try to use natural punishment rather than consequences. Now, this is something I have been processing in my brain for quite a while. And though we haven't really gotten to that yet, but I know that sometimes when we want to dish out punishment to a particular misbehavior for a child, we use, maybe for instance, spanking and then beating, or we say, okay, no sweets for you, or no food for you, or no, all of that. Now, all of this punishment might not work 100% because the child will want to avoid such punishment and may end up lying and all of that. So instead of doing that, I feel we should rather use natural consequences to our behaviors, to the child's behavior rather. For instance, if the child keeps hitting a particular toy or using a particular toy the wrong way, and you have corrected or shown the child the correct way of using that toy several times, and you think that child should have gotten it, and the child keeps doing it, now you will now have to warn the child and tell the child, if you keep on using this toy this way, then I'll have to take it away from you. Of course, they are still children, so taking that toy away from them at that time is big punishment in quote altogether. but that is a natural consequence for misusing a particular toy. Okay, another example could be maybe a child or a toddler playing with his or her food when he should be eating it. Now, if a child starts to do that, or some toddlers are very fond of doing this, when you put puree in their mouth, they tend to want to spit it out and splash it in your face and all of that. It's fun to them. But if you see a child playing with food like that, a natural consequence to that is telling the child, so if you keep doing this, you have to stop this. If you keep doing this, then I would take the food away from you, or I might be forced to take away the food from you. So that is a natural consequence at that particular time, rather than because the child is playing with food, then you now have to now spank the child or punishment of such. So let's not use punishments that are disconnected from the particular action. So that child would end up learning or grow up learning that for every action there is always a consequence, for whether positive or negative, for every action they take. So it is natural for you not to be careful, for example, with a glass of water, because the natural consequence of that, of not being careful with a glass of water, even as an adult, is that the glass would break, and maybe whatever the content will spill, and then you have no access to whatever you think that you want to enjoy again. So this is just a little example for this point. Now, speaking of natural consequence, one illustration I would like to give is the father-child relationship we have with God. Now, one of the very wrong impressions we have about God is the fact that if I sin, God will punish you. If I do this, God will. I don't think God keeps punishment on people for the wrong they do. Now, the way God has designed the world, He has designed it such that everything that you do has its consequence, whether positive or negative. For example, if you read, if you study, all things being equal, you should pass. Okay, I said all things being equal because there could be other factors too. If you are lazy, you would not end up where you want to be. Everything just has its consequence. So when you, for instance, sin, and one obvious sin I would say here is fornication. For instance, if you have, for instance, premarital sex, you would not, the natural consequences are there already. So sometimes we feel like it is God that is punishing me for all the sins I have. God has just set the law, He has set the rules, and if you obey them, then you enjoy the positive consequences of those of obeying the rules. And if you disobey it, we already have natural consequences. So if God is our role model and we are His children, then our own children, don't you think it would be nice to also use natural consequences to also train them up? Another point is, don't discipline a child for crying. Don't discipline a child for crying. Crying is a natural response of a baby to displeasure. I mean, if they don't cry, you'll be bothered. I mean, if a child does not cry at all and does not cry at all, won't you rush that child to the hospital or, start firing prayer? Really? So, don't discipline a child for crying. The fact that a child is wailing, screaming, crying, it's okay for them to cry, don't you think? You don't want to end up with a toddler or a child or even an adult that hides and suppresses their feelings because they know mommy and daddy, or mommy or daddy would not be happy because they cried. So it's okay to please allow them to express themselves through crying. Don't discipline a child for crying, please. So another point is that you respond calmly when there is a situation with your child. You don't want that child to see you lose it, like to see you shout, get angry, and you want the child to still see you being as calm as you can. That means that you are really in charge of the situation. Now, it does not matter what you feel inside at that moment. You might be angry, and so just take a deep breath and just reply or respond or react very calmly, just like you would maybe in your place of work if you're the boss and you don't want your employees to see you lose it, so to say. Another point I would like to note here is that no spanking. Really, if we look at it, like I said in my previous video, beating a child, I don't think it is a permanent solution to the behavior. Now, mind you, when you have it in mind to discipline a child, it's not that you just intentionally want to inflict pain on that child at that point. What you're trying to address is the character. Okay, you want to stop. The child is not bad in him or herself, but there's a particular character that you want to control. Okay, that you don't want to, get out of hand, or you don't want that child to grow into, and you want the child to learn from it. So, is spanking and beating going to do that? In the child's mind, when I do this, I am being flogged. So I will not do it so that I will not be flogged. Is that what you want to achieve? Just so that the child will avoid being flogged. So I feel that spanking is actually a temporal solution to some certain behaviors in a child. And at the end of the day, you see that when a child outgrows spanking in quotes, the child just keeps doing whatever it is that he or she feels to do. Okay, so I would just leave this point here and think of better methods of disciplining a child rather than spanking that would give us a long-term result. So that on the long run, you are not obeying because you want to avoid this, but you're obeying because you know that there is a natural consequence attached to this, and you love your father. You want to please him. So this is one major way I look at parenting. When I try to, I'm really looking at and trusting God to help us, download and anyways, it is in his word already. God will help us to, keep discovering some of these things that we need as the time goes on. Now, finally, show unconditional love. Children need our unconditional love. Just the way we can depend on God because he loves us regardless. This is a fact that the devil does not want us to actually understand, the fact that God loves us. So if our children understand that mommy, daddy loves me regardless of what I do, then it would make them confident in us. It will make them even confident in themselves while they do all of the things that they do. And mind you, we're not even talking about babies who have grown up and all of that. We're even talking about even little babies that you think don't know anything. They're also humans themselves, and they read things. They receive love. So if you show them conditional love, and when I mean conditional love, I mean if you're a good child, then you receive love from mommy. If you're a good child, if you're a good child, then you would, if you are good, then you would receive here. All of that. For instance, in a family, let's say we have 2 children, and the first child is maybe the stubborn one, and the second one is more gentle. Naturally, it is natural for the parents to, pour more love on the more gentle ones because they are where we want them to be. They are obedient, they're not violent, and they are doing everything we want them to do. But we forget that children are different, So regardless of what character they exhibit, it is good to please let us show these children that we love them and tell them that we love them unconditionally. Even when they are screaming and they are in their worst, they should all still know and grow up with this idea that my mommy loves me regardless of what I do. This is where you build trust, that they can come back to you and tell you whatever it is that has happened, whether good or bad, because they know you won't judge them. So I believe that with these few things I have mentioned in this video, this would really help us as we start to prepare our minds and change our perspective of how we discipline our children. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button and then share this with as many as you think would need it. Also, do not forget to subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much if you have subscribed already. Subscribe to this channel because there is a whole lot that I know that God has in mind for children, and I'll be sharing a lot of it with you as I go on this parenting journey. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. See you next time.